Hello and welcome everyone to DRJ's webinar series. I am Bob Arnold, President here at Disaster Cover Journal. Today's sponsor is Swan Island Networks, and the topic is Situational Awareness, Present and Future Imperatives. Before we get started, I wanted to review a couple housekeeping items. Today's session is being recorded. This recording will be shared with everyone tomorrow via an automated email. Attendees are also in a listen-only mode. If you would like to ask any questions, please use the question panel you'll locate on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll answer as many of these questions as possible at the end of the session. Now back to today's topic on situational awareness. Our presenter today is Pete Odell. Pete is the Chief Executive Officer of Swan Island Networks. He is a seasoned business executive in technology, security, and software. Before joining Swan Island Networks, he served as the Chief Operating Officer for a number of high-growth startups and was president of Autodesk Retail Products. He is the author of Silver Bullets and Cyber 24/7. His new book, Global Shared Resilience, is slated for publication in Q1 of 2021, but likely will be delayed by the pandemic and his continual procrastination. He is a poor golfer, avid fisherman, and volunteers with fishingcommunity.org, a nonprofit focused on veterans and their families. He is also a National Capital Region InfraGard member. And now, with no further introductions, I'd like to welcome and turn the mic over to Pete.
Great. Thanks, Bob, and welcome everyone. I'm glad you could make it today. I'm sure you're scattered across the four corners of the globe watching this. So we'll try to go fairly quickly today. We'll make the slides available if you so want those, and we've also put a link to our demo site. We have some other resources we'll point you to. So to get started, I want to just call your attention to the quote on the bottom left of my first slide. If you don't know Peter Drucker, he's a management consultant who died around 2005, but did some incredible work throughout the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and was one of the quintessential people out there on how businesses should run. And his quote, I thought, was very appropriate to what we're going to talk about today. The idea that you're going to run into turbulence. But working with yesterday's logic as opposed to what's happening right now is a bad thing. And situational awareness will help move you closer to having real-time capability to make your decisions. So that's what we'll spend most of our time chatting about today. I did want to spend a few minutes just on an agenda, give you a quick intro to Swan Island Networks, a little state of the planet 2020, and then we'll talk into an overarching view of situational awareness, and then get down to the brass tacks. And then if we have time at the end after Q&A, we're going to do a quick lightning demo of our TX Global product, and we have a special offer for anybody who might want to look at that. So, but that'll be, like I said, after we're done with Q&A. If we get to it, that's great. If not, no problem. So we went through my background on both my books. If you want a PDF copy of those, I'm happy to give those away free. And all you have to do is email me. I am looking for some collaborators on the book. I am constantly procrastinating on finishing. I'm about half or 60% done. So if you're interested in being a co-author or helping on that, I'd love to chat with you about that. I want to tell you a little bit about Swan Island Networks. We're based in Portland, Oregon, and contrary to your local news, Portland, Oregon is still standing and has not been obliterated. We've had a few riots and things for the last 100 days, but the city itself is quite resilient, and the areas where the protests are happening are actually fairly small. And we're a software as a service company. We really got two cloud-based all hazards platforms. Our enterprise product, which is full command center tool set, and gives you proactive monitoring, situational awareness and then for all organizations, a kind of Spotify version of our enterprise product, which is called TX Global Learning, which all you need to do is plug it in, add your geospatial locations, and you'll get filtered alerting for those geospatial locations at a very strong price. We also provide analysts as a service. I'll touch a little bit on that today, the importance of surge capabilities. And we're an Allied Universal technology partner. Allied Universal is a $7 billion, $7+ billion security firm you may be aware of. They also have, in addition to their 250,000 security guards, they have a risk and consulting services group, which provides a wide range of high-end services, and then a technology group as well that provides software integration and security systems integration. And then we have a couple of digests that you can email us if you want to get on the mailing list for that, because I'm sure you don't have enough things to read these days. I wanted to touch on the state of the planet and kind of set the stage for, for the rest of the webinar. It's very easy to get caught up in all the things that are happening that are bad, right? We're living through the global pandemic. There's cyber problems that have actually accelerated, lots of climate change, economic volatility, financial inequality, and a whole raft of bad things. But once in a while, you got to kind of look at the plus side and realize over the last 50 years, we've moved the world forward collectively, where we've taken billions of people out of poverty and hunger. We've raised life expectancies. We've done a tremendous amount of things getting rid of diseases. The internet, and I'll talk a little bit about this, is moving towards being able to enable everybody on the planet to get high-speed internet access. We've got renewable energy and the use of battery technology to help mitigate some of the critical infrastructure problems around power, online education, and new things happening all the time. I mean, one example is there was a breakthrough the other day that may re-enable the hunt for nuclear fusion because of some kind of change in the current structure that somebody discovered that I don't know anything about, but it sounded very very promising. So, and then bringing things home to where we are right now, as everybody probably knows, we're in the middle of the pandemic. The U.S. in particular has just done a horrendous job. You can debate with yourself, why and why not. But we've got 190,000 people dead. We've got the most number of cases in the world, and this is a stubborn pandemic. Anytime any country relaxes, their case counts start going right back up. Right? We got vaccines and trials where they hope we're going to show up in mass in 2021. And from a personal standpoint, I would tell you, having done 4 or 5 trips since this started, and a couple to fairly high case count places, the idea of washing your hands, wearing a mask, staying out of bars, and a few other things, at least so far, has kept me in healthy shape. We are starting to see some real problems with kind of a whipsaw effect from the pandemic, where a bunch of kids went to school, the school suddenly opened up, everybody had a great party, and a bunch of people got sick, and then suddenly people are going home, right, and they're sick, to the point where Anthony Fauci had to say, look, stay at school if you're sick, because there's a multiplier effect of you don't want to take it home to your grandparents and your parents, but at the same time, and you don't want to get on a plane. So, and in the midst of the pandemic, we're seeing a tremendous number of other issues right now. As I mentioned, we're based in Portland, Oregon. A far bigger threat to us right now than the civil unrest is fire. The whole west coast of the United States is under incredible fire danger. Several folks in my staff meeting a few minutes ago, you could actually see smoke, and it was definitely affecting everybody in the area there. And we've seen very active hurricane system, civil unrest, and there's actually a meteor aimed at the planet that's supposed to show up on election day and has about a 5% or 0.5% chance of hitting the planet. So something else to just throw into your basket of things to think about. On the recovery side, one of the things that's been amazing is you've had these essential workers, right? And I would put the security guards, the electrical workers, all the healthcare workers, everybody's been out there keeping the planet going so that the rest of us who can work from home, and my entire company's been able to work at home virtually, can continue to do that. We owe a great debt of thanks to all those people that are doing that on a day in and day out basis. The recovery is definitely fraught with problems, virus recurrence, kind of unknown economic issues. What kind of shape is the recovery going to take? A lot of people thought it was going to be a sharp V where it went down and went back up. In other cases, it looks like it's going to be a W. For things like cruise ships, it may be an L where that goes down and it never comes back up because it's going to continue to have problems. We've seen areas where, the things that are happening during the pandemic may have major effects on us going forward, right? Are we going to keep working from home? What's going to happen with commercial real estate? Are we going to get back to an NFL game anytime soon? What's going to happen when you fly? For those of us that used to fly a lot, it's a very strange thing to be doing everything virtual. And we're seeing a lot of things that are accelerating, home delivery, collaboration, information sharing, all those types of things, digital events that are being done from that standpoint. So just some things to keep in mind as we go through, this idea of situational awareness. And I wanted to take and put situational awareness in a bigger, setting in terms of two things. So one is preparedness, which is being ready, poised for action, ready to go. And to us, a big part of that is this mutual assistance network, right? And that's not a formal, thing like between the states and FEMA, those kinds of things, but companies and partners that you can count on, both from an industry standpoint and from a regional standpoint, that will help you, ratchet up your preparedness, but also help you when actually bad things happen. And again, from a proactive standpoint, the more you can get ahead of these problems, the more, you're going to reap from that as a return on investment, rather than trying to wait till something happens and then go, oh, we won't do it next time, except it usually does. Resilience is another aspect, that kind of is a superset of situational awareness and the other things in the response world. And we've done a lot of work with the New York City Metropolitan Resilience Network, which debuted after Superstorm Sandy. And Judith Rogan was the chairman of the Rockefeller Foundation. She wrote a great book, which is listed there, on resilience and the ability to take a hit and bounce back. And for, as a kind of a different way to think about it, if you've seen the Timex commercials from the 60s and 70s, the take a licking keeps on ticking is a great way to think about resilience. Easy to remember. So let's dive into situational awareness. This is a great definition. Situational awareness is having an accurate understanding of the surroundings, where we are, what happened, what's happening now, what could happen, what's changing. All those things are factored into a real-time set of situational awareness. And this emerged largely in the 30s and 40s around the airline industry, a whole capability called the OODA Loop, which contained the idea of situational awareness. However, George Washington, he might not have had the term situational awareness, but he knew what it was, and he deployed, a fair amount of the Continental Army's resources to get ahead of where they were and understand, for example, where to send their resources, where the British were, all those types of things, so that they could be more proactive and leverage the resources that they had as they moved into the battle that eventually won the United States freedom from Britain. And there's also a whole set of ways of thinking about different scenarios for situational awareness. Right? We're in the middle of a real-time crisis with the pandemic, right? And you certainly know about others. 9/11 was a big incident, active shooters, things that show up, kind of as a no notice, even though there may have been some, rumblings, but literally showed up out of the blue, and and then here they are. And then there are other situations where you have a little bit of time and you can do a little bit of work to get ready, but it may be short. In New York City, Superstorm Sandy, really, came into focus about 5 days before it hit the New York metro area, and that really did a tremendous amount of damage. But it did allow some preparation time. In other cases, with disease, other capabilities, you have months to get ready. And then all of us are dealing with very long-term, pervasive threats. Our company out in Portland, Oregon, has been waiting for the big one up in the Pacific Northwest that's supposed to do a tremendous amount of damage to Western Oregon and Western Washington through a major earthquake. We've got the issue of major cyber breaches, climate change that we don't know, how that's going to manifest itself, but we're certainly starting to see some indications. And these are ones that it's easy to go, boy, we're really not going to spend any time on that. And we knew a number of companies that were ready for the pandemic, and we knew a whole bunch of people that had said, well, it's such a low probability thing, we're not going to worry about it too much. So today, if you're worried about situational awareness, you got to think about it in a number of different fronts. It's not the simple problem it was a year ago. Today, you're trying to deal with pandemic operations. So you've got, what am I doing right now to keep all my people safe? What are the new procedures I've been putting into place? What are we doing to keep things going and hopefully get back to recovery? But the recovery is another whole area where the rules are changing quickly. Back to that Peter Drucker quote. If you're working on Monday's rules on Wednesdays and the rules have changed twice, you're wasting your time, right? So staying in front of the things you have to be thinking about are key. And then, thinking about active threats, what are the other things that are going on around my organization that can affect those? And certainly, weather may affect your supply chain. Some of the civil unrest, cyber attacks, all those things be causing other major problems right in the midst of the first two we talked about. And then using the pandemic as an example of looking at other, high impact, low probability events, which is probably one of the last things you want to think about. But you need to think about it in the context of, the global pandemic everybody knew it was coming, right? George Bush in 2004 had spent a very large amount of time talking about it, putting some things in place. Bill Gates in 2015 put out an incredibly prediction about it was coming. Yet, we still got caught short because everybody thought, oh, it's going to be high impact, but it's a low probability. You don't know when it's going to happen. Well, these are some of the other ones that could happen, right? Major earthquakes, a solar EMP, which is not an attack. It's just something that happens on the sun every few hundred years. And, in the 1800s, burned up a lot of telegraph lines with a major, solar storm that hit the U.S. on a very intense basis, right? And today the impact would be 10,000-fold. Yellowstone is a continued issue of, it's a super volcano that could erupt, happens every billion years. You never know when, right? Similar with a meteor, probably a more higher probability. There's actually one coming close to the Earth on Election Day. And then, we've got the climate change issue, which we don't know yet whether that's going to be a continued slowly ratcheting impact, or do we hit a certain point where the impacts go exponential and you get a huge amount of ice shifts, sea rise, those types of things. And that's all before you get to, man on man or people on people events where we're suddenly trying to create our own extinction event by attacking each other. So things to think about from a situational awareness standpoint. So I'm going to go back to, I think, probably 5th grade, and this was something I learned that one of the things I got out of my New York State education that has served me for 55 years is this idea of 5 W's and H, right? So, what, why, when, who, where, and how, usually in a slightly different order, but I took some creative license here to do it this way. So we're going to talk through each of these in the context of situational awareness. So I want to talk about what situational awareness is, and there's really 2 pieces of it, right? There's this organizational mindset. What are we going to do as an organization? Are we going to be ready, or are we going to wait and see what happens, right? And one of the monikers is, you make it happen, you watch it happen, or then you wonder what happened, right? And we've got a lot of organizations we work with that are very focused on standing watch 24/7. And, I just watched over the weekend about a 12-minute video on the Titanic where, through a series of, misattention, they lost a lot of lives, right? They shut down the group that ran the wireless, which in fact didn't work for the Titanic and was mostly focused on sending telexes for passengers. They had communications issues. They sailed too fast. They did a whole series of things, ignoring the fact that they were in a high danger area. So the mindset is key. And then it comes down to the tactical capabilities, right? How do we gather, intelligence on, risks, on hazards? How do we target and filter that information? Because there's a lot of it. How do we apply it to proximity near our facilities and near our corporate assets, near our people? And how do we get it to the right people on time, right? All those different things become important. And with situational awareness, how do you integrate to the other areas that you have to worry about? Mass notification, incident management, and other capabilities inside your SOCs and GSOCs, be they virtual or be they fully built out inside your corporation. So why is this important? Working from left to right, you can save lives with situational awareness. If you're ahead of the game, you may have the time to move people out of danger. You may have the ability to reposition people. There's a whole set of things you can do, and lives are critical for the people that lose their lives. But also, if you've ever been in an organization that has had people killed because of an accident, and I was involved in a company that had an industrial accident because we made ammunition for the military, and we had a bunch of shells rubbed together and self-ignite and explode and kill about 4 people. I mean, it's a huge impact on the organization going forward, right? With lesser impacts on, on corporate assets, which still can be devastating, on corporate reputation, which, you only have to screw up once, even if you've done 1,000, great things in the past. Reputation is very tough to rebuild. For a lot of you, you know all about continuity. How do you keep things going even when things aren't going the way you want, right? How do I reconfigure around these different obstacles? And then from the dollar side, how do I save hard dollars by getting the right tools, under the right circumstances? And then one of the things we found with our customers on situational awareness is if you don't have a formal program, it's still being done, except it's being done by a very large percentage of the people inside the organization using Google Chrome, which adds up to hundreds of thousands, in some cases millions of dollars of hidden costs, because people are getting up and doing the same type of situational awareness research every day without any good tools. So when do you need situational awareness? Well, that depends on your organization. And you need to look at your threat matrix that you're dealing with, your company's risk appetite. Some companies will take much larger risks than others. Some of that is, we'll talk about why that's some of the factors that determine that in a bit. You need to think about whether your situational awareness needs to be 24/7. For most of the large organizations with a worldwide view, it becomes that way. And we have even small customers who are 24/7 because their supply chain extends around the world. They may be, 6 facilities in the United States, but their supply chain comes from China, it comes from Vietnam, it comes from Europe, and they have to try to stand watch around those particular areas and understand what might affect them. And this also affects people during blue sky days, gray sky days, black sky days, and recovery. So situational awareness becomes key throughout all those different segments. And then who's involved, right? And the answer is largely everybody should be, but it's broken down by a number of different categories. So just like in cybersecurity, the C-suite and the board really need to be involved and define, what's the organization mission, what's the risk appetite, how much are we willing to chance on having a single point of failure, for example, on a major factory? Are we willing to do that, or do we need to invest another $1 billion to have a redundant facility? What kind of plans and resources are going to be recommended that we're going to approve? And then the C-suite and the board are the ones that get to be accountable if something bad happens, right? The lawyers come for the leaders of the company because they have a fiduciary responsibility to protect the corporation from all the things that can hurt it. And then you've got all the different people throughout the organization, and in a large organization, there can be multiple silos, right? The enterprise risk management, business continuity, the IT guys, crisis management, security command center, other folks throughout the organization who may or may not be working on an aligned set of parameters. And then you've got the people out in the business, right? The operational components, the division heads, the division groups that are making different components or interacting with different customer groups. And then also stakeholders, right? Stakeholders inside the organization, customers and suppliers who suddenly may be heavily impacted by an event that happens inside the organization. And the other key is surge resources. And surge resources, in short, are resources that you can add to your dedicated resources in the event that you have a problem, right? How do you get an extra 15 people to help out with a problem when you only have 5 on an ongoing basis from a dedicated resource standpoint? And there are ways to do that. And the last thing is key is everybody on watch, right? Does your organization have the ability to take collective intelligence from across the organization and roll it up into your situational awareness capability through emails, through text, through anonymous phone reporting, through a see something, say something program, an intranet with a web page that people can fill out. What do you have that allows everybody to say, hey, I think we've got a problem, right? On the where side, situational awareness is going to be key across a broad set of things based on the threat matrix, but the areas you can really focus on is your points of very high risk. We mentioned single points of failure. That may be a factory, that may be a critical group of people, it may be a critical component. When the big nuclear meltdown in Japan happened, there was a particular factory that made pearl white paint for about 5 different car manufacturers that suddenly disappeared from the market, and had huge impacts downstream on those customers because they didn't have that paint anymore. It took something like 18 months to straighten that out. And then things like disabling events, right? What happens if the major highway that gets everybody in your facility to work, not a problem today because everybody's probably working at home, but if the highway suddenly closed for 4 hours at 7 a.m., how do you let those people know we need to adapt to this, right? So lots of different areas where situational awareness can become important. And the last part is how am I going to make situational awareness happen, right? And it starts with executive leadership, understanding the importance, what are threats, what's our risk quotient, how many resources are going to work. We'd recommend combining silos so that people are working together in lockstep as opposed to pulling and pushing against each other. Sharing information, which we think is a key element. Finding the people in your industry that you can share from a non-proprietary standpoint, no kind of business collusion, but also the people that are right next to you, the ones that are going to have the same fuel problem or the same getting to people to work problem or those types of things that are right in your downtown area, even though they may be in a different industry completely, right? And then automating, building and improving your digital tools, training and upgrading your people. When you look at a command center, so many people get focused on the look and feel. It's not about the big monitors. It's about the quality of the people, the quality of the information, the process of decision making, and the blood, sweat, and tears that happens on blue sky days to be ready when bad things happen. And then another key is a key plan to surge, and then a commitment to build a continually evolving capability. Practicing exercise, debriefing, training, making sure that the tools you have are kind of oiled and ready to go, as opposed to a break glass in case of emergency where suddenly, oh, I forgot the password, or we haven't used this tool, so we don't remember really how to use it. It's been a year since we did an exercise, and now now we don't understand it. So these are some of the key issues you can think about from how to make situational awareness happen inside your organization. Sorry. I wanted to spend a minute on the idea of a threat picture. If that's not something that you're familiar with, it's the idea of, as a company, what are my threats? And these are some of the things, the variables that you can think about when you start building a threat picture that combines these all hazards type of threats that you may deal with, right? Where are we, right? Are we urban, suburban, are we rural? We have many locations. Are we in a standalone building, or are we in a building with 200 other tenants? That's 75 floors, right? Yeah. Do we interface with our customers? They come into our store. If we're a Walmart, for example, or is the only time you see us when somebody drops off your package, like with Amazon? Are you U.S. only, or are you an international company, multinational? How many employees do you have? How many geographic locations? All these factors, tie in. Another big one is regulation and compliance. How much paperwork do you have to fill out for the government in your particular industry, and how does that affect your risk posture, right? And nuclear power plants probably got a lot more paperwork to fill out on a year-in-year basis than a pizza chain, right? Maybe not, but I would hope they would. And then what things like, what is your risk tolerance? What is your corporate culture? And then what unique threats do you have? So, for example, right now, if you're one of the pharma companies working on a vaccine for COVID, you can bet you're under cyber attack, because that's a piece of intellectual property that's very valuable and probably needs to be protected, because it's a kind of a unique threat for the next 12 months to obtain that information. I also wanted to touch on critical infrastructure, which affects everybody when emergencies happen, right? And should be factored into your planning ahead of time, and from a situational awareness standpoint. So, the two that are at the top of our list are power and communications, and both are just critical. We run on electricity. The electric grid can be at risk both from natural and man-made causes. There are some capabilities in terms of microgrids, renewables, generators, battery technology that are helping to mitigate the idea of being totally out of power. And then on the communication side, things are actually going to improve quite a bit over the next couple of years. There's a set of satellite constellations from Amazon and from SpaceX that should add tremendous capabilities for internet connectivity almost anywhere on the planet. And one of the things that's almost unnoticeable is the fact that the internet just continues to work. And we've had a huge set of problems and a huge set of demand to put on the internet in the last 6 to 12 months with the pandemic. Yet it's worked very well, because it was designed to be able to self-heal and shift around problems back when it was first DARPANet and designed that way. So, we've seen some incredible capabilities on comms where we certainly had a few problems in the last few months, but all in all, it's been a fabulous experience to be able to switch over to a virtual environment. Some of these other ones, we got involved a little bit in the fuel situation, commerce situation with Superstorm Sandy. They become very complex, because you need multiple things to work together in order to get that critical infrastructure to work. And there are certainly other critical infrastructure areas that you can look at as well as you factor in. I just wanted to highlight a few of these today. So I wanted to talk about what I feel like are the imperatives for most of the companies out there. And that is, ramping your 24/7 watch efforts after you've developed your threat picture, constantly re-looking at that threat picture, and looking at secondary and tertiary impacts from an intelligence standpoint. One good example is, where are your generators, right? If your generators are in the basement, and so you've got business continuity based on, we've got backup electrical power, but the basement is such that it can be flooded and the generator could be disabled, that may be a secondary or tertiary impact that you may not have thought through. And there's a lot of complexities out there with our modern world today, where it's very tough to understand all the different dependencies of that come into play. From a command center standpoint, there's a couple of great articles from Deloitte and McKinsey about why having a command center, be it virtual or be it a physical command center established, to help throughout the pandemic and throughout this very complex recovery. And certainly, if you've established it for those reasons, adding in the other threats could be something very, very good. Finding the right tools, and then watching that you're not skipping the tools and going to manual efforts, right? Google Chrome chews up a lot of time and a lot of organizations that we run into, whereas tools would actually do a very high ROI in terms of saving some of that time. I mentioned shared resources. You can't test and exercise your people enough. Checking your plans, again, in conjunction with other people that have those same problems if possible. And then unifying and coordinating your efforts across the different silos throughout your organization. How do you make sure everybody's talking to each other and has kind of a unified view of those types of things? And then, as a lot of people listening are highly cognizant of, identifying contingency capabilities for everything that's important in your organization, and then sharing and collaborating. So we think these are key and form the basis of what we did in this webinar. I also wanted to touch on technology choices. It's a big year. A lot of people are re-looking at their technology because of budget issues and different things that are happening, and there's always new capabilities coming out and expanding. So, when we talk to customers, we made a list of some of the things that they found most valuable as they've looked at our technology. So, the idea of flexible contracts, not being locked into a particular vendor for years on end, being able to deploy very quickly, being able to customize a product and learn it very fast, having a combination of both a tool and intelligence merged together, being able to merge external information with internal information, being able to handle a geospatial capability where you can see your assets on a map, and a whole series of other capabilities where you can actually interoperate with other capabilities and not have to try to buy a brand new solution and throw everything else out, right? And we've done a lot of work with Common Learning Protocol, with KML, which Google actually donated basically to the world, that helps unify GIS systems, and RSS and GeoRSS are three of our favorite interoperable protocols, which allow us to plug in with a whole set of tools without having to do a lot of custom programming that costs a lot of money and takes a large amount of time. And then for those of you that have a little bit of technical background, there's the issue of, do I go with a cloud-based system or do you go with an on-premise system? And from our standpoint, we found the cloud to be tremendous and forward-leaning in terms of the scale that you can bring on a global basis. The costs have continued to drop. Having distributed access so that when everybody had to work from home becomes very, very easy. The security has always been strong. And we see, the Amazons, the Microsofts, Googles, IBMs, all spending a tremendous amount of information or amount of money on their cloud-based futures. So we feel like that's where the industry is going. It's going to continue to get better. And then distributed capabilities. How do you drive the capabilities you need so they can be used from anywhere in the event that you have a facility that's knocked out? So that's an overview of where we think situational awareness is today. I did want to touch on some things that you should build into your thinking for the next 3 to 4 years. If you're familiar with artificial intelligence, there's a lot going on there. It's still very early. There's a number of different kinds of algorithms and data sets that are being worked on, but I think you're going to see a tremendous amount coming, over the next 2 or 3 years, including intelligent video, which has a very large AI component. And that's the idea that a camera instead of having to be watched by a human, can actually recognize events, right? Recognize the difference between somebody grabbing somebody for a hug and grabbing them as an aggressive move, right? Recognizing somebody carrying a weapon, recognizing a license plate of somebody who threatened somebody in the organization, so that you have extra minutes in terms of response. So we see intelligent video being very, very important. I mentioned the low Earth orbit satellites from SpaceX and Amazon, the constellations that should give us a large set of capabilities from a high bandwidth standpoint around the world. And that will also enable a large number of Internet of Things sensors. So, as a simple example, and you're probably very futuristic today, but the ability to have fire sensors far closer to each other, so that you can actually detect fires faster and potentially have a robotic or a drone capability to actually put that fire out before it gets out of control, like what you're seeing in California, where it's millions of acres being burned. And the other key is all these different things being put together into what are called combinant solutions, right? And when you look at some of the new internet companies like eBay, or not eBay, Uber and Airbnb, those are services that have become the beneficiary of putting 5 or 6 things together, right? In Uber's case, it was credit cards, it was the cell phone, it was geospatial technology tracking, all those things coming together to be able to provide a combined solution that utilized many different technologies. So you're going to see a lot here in the next couple of years. One of the things you have to think about is, where's all this information going to go, right? Is it all going to go into separate interfaces inside your command center? Who's going to handle it, or does it actually combine into a capability where you can actually see multiple sets of information next to each other through a single pane of glass? So something important to think about. So with that, I think we are at a good point to wrap up and take some questions and answers. So Bob, you get any questions?
All right, wonderful, Pete. And if you have any questions for Pete here today, you can locate the question panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We've had several submitted, reading through here. First one, how are companies processing non-native language information sources?
So a couple choices. So our product in particular can be localized to any language in a very short period of time. But one of the things that you'll see that's amazing is, if you look at Google Chrome and you look at foreign language feeds, they have a translate to English or translate to any language function that is literally just like science fiction. I mean, we can hook up to an Arabic feed and suddenly it's just dropping it out in English, right? We have a dashboard that monitors geospatial Twitter at the Honolulu airport, and sometimes there's 5 or 6 languages mixed into that stream of Twitter messages that are coming from that area. And clicking on translate to English gives us this amazing translation capability.
All right, next question here. Why is interoperable data so important to future situational awareness?
So, and that's a great question. I touched on it a little bit, but the key to interoperable data, if you lived through the generation where every cell phone had a different plug before everything consolidated under USB, or if you're in the military and you understand the unifying effect 7.62 ammunition had on all the different weapons manufacturers, this whole idea of interoperability in data is key, because what happens is it allows things to snap together. Instead of getting a product and then going, okay, now it's going to take me 4 weeks to negotiate and get a contract put in place with the vendor so that I can integrate these two systems, because they can't talk with each other. If they both use interoperable data capability like Common Alerting Protocol or others, it allows them to communicate immediately. It saves time, it saves money, and allows for a greater ecosystem over time of information sharing.
All right. Do you think the siloed elements of risk will merge together in most companies?
It's a hard one. I think common sense says it should, human nature says it's going to be a tough fight, right? We've had different rice bowls in organizations for a long time. I think especially some of the budget imperatives that are going to come out of this global recession are going to force people to look at, how do we unify and how do we get some of those economies of scale by making everybody work together.
All right, next question here. Why is a common interface for multiple systems important?
A comment. Oh, okay, sure. So the key is if you go into a command center, and this also can apply to your cell phone. So if you have, let's start at the cell phone. That's probably what most of it can relate to on a very easy to relate to basis. So if you've got 6 emergency apps on your cell phone and an emergency happens, how do you keep track of all 6 and know which one to use in what circumstances? It gets very confusing. Well, the same thing happens in a command center where if you've got 7 or 8 different systems and you're logging into one to get the weather, another one to get the crime, another one to get internal information, another one to get a geospatial view of your assets around the world, and they don't talk to each other, it can become very confusing and counterproductive in terms of being able to manage all that information. And the key to get a hold of it now is that it's just going to get worse. As you get these additional, camera interfaces, as you get the additional sensor information, as you get automatic alerts being sent from cell phones into the command center, you've got to have a way to organize it, to correlate it with events that are related to each other, and be able to digest that, because the people are not, getting any smarter, faster, better, right? All the technology is, but the people still have to deal with overload. And so trying to minimize that overload becomes key.
All right, how many corporate assets have you seen for one company worldwide?
I think we've seen about 16,000 is the largest we've seen. So when you think about global organizations trying to keep track worldwide, you've got about 190 countries. And so in some cases, you just have this gigantic number of places around the world, right? I mean, one in the U.S. that immediately comes to mind is Starbucks, right? They have a gigantic number of stores. They're not a customer of ours yet. But when you think about all the things that could happen in all the different stores, it presents this gigantic problem of being able to share local information that's important without overloading the entire structure with meaningless information.
All right, how fast would you typically could a company deploy a solution if needed?
We have set up companies on a same-day basis. So because we deploy out of the cloud, we can actually deploy very quickly. And I think you're seeing that kind of capability from a number of companies out there. I don't want to make like we're the only one, but I think a lot of people are starting to pay attention to the fact that you need to be able to deploy, very rapidly, that you don't get a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks to get something set up. And deploying means being able to, get access to the solution, but also being able to execute against it. And so in our case, the fact that our product comes with content, the fact that it comes with already viable dashboards for major cities and those types of things helps improve that deployability quite a bit.
All right, well, that brings us to the end of the Q&A here. If you do have any questions, you can certainly reach out to Pete and the Swan Island Networks team. Their information and email there is on the screen there for you. So any parting words here today, Pete?
Yeah, I'm going to skip the lightning demo of TX Global. I'll spend a minute talking about it, and then but I will offer up that anybody that attended the session, we have a 3-month offer of using TX Global for 5 people with 50 geospatial locations for $100 for the next 3 months, and that would normally be $499 a month. So a fairly substantial savings. And obviously, the only way we can do that is because it's all digital. So if you are interested in that, we'd be happy to separately schedule a demo of TX Global. It's a very easy to use automated alerting system. Just feel free to contact me or email info@swanisland.net.
All right, wonderful. Thanks again, everyone, for your attendance here today. Again, we hope you gather some great information from today's webinar. DRJ would also like to thank Pete for his time here today, as well as Swan Island Networks for sponsoring today's webinar. We will be emailing everyone a link to the recording. You may view that recording as frequently as you wish or share it with your peers. If you have any additional questions, please contact Disaster Cover Journal. Thank you again, and this now ends today's webinar.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete.